Morning, Ben. Good to see you
Morning.
again. Slight change in how we're going to do this today. We're just going to run through a few of the parasites that you've seen in the last month or so. And then second section is looking ahead to see what we think might happen in the next couple of months. And then you've got a couple of interesting cases that have popped up as well that we weren't quite expecting.
Yeah, always unexpected things with parasites.
I'll hand over to you on the first bit.
Very good. So it has really been a year of two halves. The grass was growing really well to start with, lots of rain. Then everybody cut their silage on the 15th of June. St. Swithin's Day came a month early, didn't rain on the 15th of June, and it hasn't really rained ever since. So the next slide shows that, broadly speaking, things were as you would expect. And I didn't think the Nematodirus hatch was quite as much of a spike as it normally is, possibly because some of them hatched a bit earlier and weren't there when the lambs were, which might mean that the immunity to Nematodirus might not be quite as high as it was and might make you think about autumn nematodirosis. But generally speaking, overall, worms and cocci were sort of as expected until the drought. But now we have drought, or in some parts of the country we've had drought. You've got a choice of silage aftermaths which haven't really grown, or you've got a choice of long, tall, stemmy grass, which was the remains of non-silage fields, which means that the worm challenge is generally low, as in worms are not hatching out because it's too hot and too dry. So that means that they do not need to be wormed, and if you do worm them, it's not just that you're wasting your money, it's that you are risking resistance because the in refugia population is low, and if you put some resistant worms by worming them onto that pasture, then there's a risk that those resistant worms will predominate because they will form quite a large proportion of the worm population on the pastures. Lambs will grow unhindered by worms because the worms aren't holding them back. All they need is food, whether that be grass, whether that be a herbal ley, or whether that be some creep.
It is always worth saying it's best to check because, there will be some areas of the country that have had just enough moisture to keep the worms ticking over. That's interesting, Ben. So we've got a couple of decisions we can make now, a couple of choices.
So the other thing, if it's hot, dry and there's little grass, people still say to me that they daren't wean their lambs because they've nowhere to put them. But there are considerations here, because the longer you leave your lambs on the ewes when there's not much food about, the more risk of the ewes getting mastitis are, and you're losing ewes for no reason. Just get the lambs off the ewes to reduce the risk of mastitis. That then raises the question of what to do with the lambs. If you really have nowhere to put them, then consider selling as many as you can as stores. What I'm saying is this is a fork in the road, which is what the next slide shows. Do you take the left fork, which is your normal strategy, and try to finish the lambs, keep them on, feed them, whatever, look forward to a big worm challenge when the rain does come? Or do you do something different and radical, which is sell more stores than normal, get rid of them if the price is good, and then enjoy all the benefits that will give you in terms of those lambs not putting worm eggs onto the pasture for the rest of the year when the rains come and the worms increase?
Okay, so what are we expecting to see in the next month or so?
Yeah, so sooner or later it is going to rain, and we have to ask ourselves what is going to happen with the rain and in what sequence and when. So here are my suggestions. One, when it rains, there's going to be a sudden increase in carbohydrates, in fields sooner or later. That will mean pulpy kidney will be triggered. Pulpy kidney is always triggered by a sudden increase in carbohydrates. So now's the time to make sure everything is vaccinated against pulpy kidney: Covexin, Bravoxin, Heptovac P, Ovivac P, if the lambs aren't already. The second thing that happens is a big increase in carbohydrate means you get twisted guts. Not much you can do about that, but see it coming. And then the third thing that happens when it rains is that all those worm eggs that are holed up in those fecal pats will suddenly be smashed apart. There'll be nice humid weather for the worms to rise up onto the grass, and there will be an increase in worm challenge. After 1 to 2 weeks, those worms start to wake up. They go into the ewes, but you have to wait to see a worm egg count increase. You're looking at something like 3 to 4 to 5 weeks after it rains. When there is a change in weather, the worm egg counts will be a bit behind the curve.
Or it's a case of be prepared, and if you know they've been in that field for a while and it rains, get ready to move them before there's a problem.
And then the last section is, we make all these predictions, and vets are not much better than economists. We're as wrong as often as we're right. So I've been saying to people, here's the first example of that. Don't worry about lungworm in cattle. It's too dry. Lungworm, it needs rain and then it'll get going, which generally speaking is true. But here is a case which proved me wrong. They were brought in, about a month before they calved, and then they calved. So their immunity will have been knocked. They'll have been stressed by movement. And I think what happened is the lungworms that were in those cattle took advantage of that drop in immunity, hatched out, and they lost a few heifers with lungworm, which is surprising in such dry conditions. And surprise number 2, and the story really of the autumn, has been babesia, tick-borne diseases, which haven't been seen in Northumberland for a long time, suddenly popping up in Northumberland for reasons that nobody knows. But be vigilant. So babesia is a parasite spread by ticks, which goes into the bloodstream, breaks down the red blood cells. The red blood cells are, excreted in urine. So you get red water, blood in urine, which you can see with your own 2 eyes, and it can have quite a high mortality rate. And this has popped up in Northumberland for reasons which we can speculate about, in farms that haven't seen babesia either ever or for a long time. You're talking about 50 years. So who knows why, but we must expect the unexpected. All the more reason to never waste a dead animal.
Good point there, Ben. Thank you very much. Yeah, but thank you very much. It's always the case. Unexpected deaths should be checked over, and it could save you problems in the future.
Very good.
Thank you very much. We will see what happens, see if our predictions are correct for the next episode.
We will, yeah. See you then.
Cheers, Ben.